Thank you so much, Dr. Bamba. And thank you all for coming. We hope that you enjoy our program today. I'm Melinda Van Niel. I'm the program manager of MACRMI. I think I've met all of you, or most of you, before, and so we're so happy you're here. A few housekeeping things beforehand. If you have not checked in, please check in at the desk because you won't be able to receive CME credit if you don't. So please do that before you leave. The objectives that we have for you today are, 1, to describe how the care process works behind the scenes for risk managers, providers, and claims representatives, and 2, to recognize the benefits of care programs to physicians, patients, and healthcare institutions, and understand how to realize those benefits with the program. We don't have any disclosures for this portion of the session today. So before we get started with our simulations, which I think are really the highlight of this morning, we want to talk a little bit about what MACRMI and CARE are. We know that most of you have an idea of what communication, apology, and resolution is, and that probably most of you want to be doing this or feel like it's the right thing to do. So we won't go over the principles too much, but we do want to talk a little bit about what MACRMI can do to help you and how we can help you to really actually have a true care program in your institutions, or if you're not in an institution, support these programs in your work. So what is communication, apology, and resolution for those of you that are new? It's to, first of all, communicate with patients and families when unanticipated adverse outcomes occur and provide for their immediate needs. And that's really what we found in our experience, and this is the 7th forum, has been the key component of this. It's really about communicating honestly and transparently and empathetically. The second piece is, of course, to investigate what happened in the event and actually explain that to the patient patiently and answer their questions. The third, and we feel very important piece, is to implement systems to avoid recurrences of that. And then where appropriate, formally apologize, take responsibility, and work towards resolution, including a fair offer of compensation if appropriate, without that patient having to file a lawsuit. And so the MACRMI sites have been doing this for a number of years now. And lots of people have asked me, well, what do you feel like the difference is between, saying, oh, I really wish we could do this, we're sort of doing it, I hope we can do it, and we are definitely doing this. And what I've really come up with is that these two things. And one is that the MACRMI sites do this on every case, every time. And if you've been here before, you know that that doesn't necessarily mean that every patient gets paid. What it means is that we are transparent and communicating with patients every time they come to us and say, something happened and I don't understand this. Please help me to understand, or I'm angry, or I'm upset, or I'm scared. And that's every patient every time. Not if they just come to you because they decided they want to file a claim, not only those who are angry, those that we know that something went wrong and that they deserve our attention and our care. And the second is really being proactive. I think some places have done some of these cases, but only where something comes to them. And part of the MACRMI system is to go to those patients when you know that you've done something wrong, that harmed a patient, that caused them harm, that you are upfront and you come to them and say, we'd like to resolve this. So those are really the two big difference makers, and that's really what we want to try to show you today, is how that can work and make everything in your system better for you and for your patients, your providers, and really the whole system's safety. So hopefully we can show you that today. And this is just a slide of all the members of MACRMI. We've been growing throughout the years. We've added a few partners institutions recently. We have added Sturdy Memorial. We've added Atrius over time. So we are adding new and different systems and different sizes of hospitals. We're going to show you today a couple of different scenarios in different kinds of places. And really our goal as MACRMI is to make this the new status quo for adverse events in Massachusetts. And so that's our whole goal, and we hope that you'll join us in that. Then we wanted to talk a little bit about the benefits of being part of MACRMI. One is that you really have free implementation guidance. That's one of the main things that we do, is we come into your institution and just help you look at what you have and how you can make that work for you, how to implement the policies that we have written, the algorithms we have written, put those into your system so you can use them every day. As I said, we have lots of free tools and resources, and we can help you use them. They're all up on our website, but we do find that if we can sort of help you navigate that, help you to look through what we have and apply it to your setting, that can be really helpful. And also, very valuably, we have a community of experienced individuals from different systems with different sizes and models, so that you can discuss challenges. This is a difficult thing to implement. It's not always black and white what you should do. Sometimes it's different if you're in a community hospital than if you're in an academic medical center, how you might approach something. And having that community around you to discuss these kinds of cases and these kinds of things that you're dealing with is really helpful. And we have heard from our members that has been one of the most valuable things. And finally, we have the wider community, not just of the institutions, but other members of MACRMI who are involved in all different aspects of the medical liability process, which really helps us to get a community working together to solve these problems so that this can be the way that medical malpractice events are resolved. And so, as you know, we have lots of different resources. We have best practices for institutions, attorneys, insurers. We have patient information and brochures, things that you can hand directly to patients when they have an adverse event, all the way to just information for them if they're interested. We have a readiness checklist to see if the climate in your institution is ready for implementing something like this. We have policies and procedures already written that you can put into your policy book, have your board approve, things like that, so you don't have to rewrite them. We have our algorithms, FAQs for patients, providers, and attorneys, slide decks you can use so you don't have to reinvent the wheel, an implementation guide that goes through all the steps of how to implement this and links to all of our different resources. We have lots of articles and supportive evidence. Our latest health affairs article, which was debuted here last year before it actually came out, has been published and is up for free on our website until June 4th. So if you want it, go and get it now, because it won't be there forever, but you can download it for free. And it's, I know, very useful sometimes to have articles when you're talking to physicians or others that are, say, this sounds like a good idea, but does it really work? So we have a lot of that there for you. And this year, our newest resource is an inventory of patient safety improvement spread ideas from care cases and from care institutions. So as I said, one of the most important things is how can we prevent these events from happening? And particularly with care cases, we want to really try to get to the root of the cause of those and to be able to spread it not only in our own institution, but to other institutions so that they do not have to experience the same type of problem. And I'm going to show you now how to use our website to find that and other resources. So our website is macrmi.info. If you Google MACRMI, it will come right up. And this is going to hopefully launch into the website. And once you get there, by far what's used most on our website is this resource library, which is right up here. And you just click this, and then you can choose to search by category. So you can pick a category if you know you want a best practice, for example. Then they're all listed here in alphabetical order. But if you were looking, for example, for that inventory, you can type a keyword, and it will come up right here, and the new ones are flagged. And then you can just download it, and you can take a look at it. So this is what we've put together, and we wanted to give you a list of strategies that you could use in your own institution to show what other care institutions are doing when they find something wrong, how they can spread those strategies for improvement. So that's our latest resource. Okay. And a lot of people have asked me, okay, so it sounds like a great idea to join MACRMI, but what do I have to do? And really, there's not much. There's right now no cost to joining MACRMI. We really just want to help you implement these programs. This is what we need from you. One, that you will implement this program system-wide and that you'll use our algorithms and best practices. Two, you will have to submit just really basic data from our algorithms. When a case comes in, it will end up one of many letters, A through F, and you will just tell us, this quarter I had 10 A's, 2 B's, 3 C's. So something very basic, but what that helps us do is to show you how you compare to other similar sized institutions, how many cases they're getting, how many of each outcome they're getting, so that you can see, are we doing things the same? Are we having a gap somewhere? And we can look at that with you and help you to figure that out. And then just attend MACRMI meetings. So really, it's a pretty low commitment, but one that makes a really big difference. So today, we have for you two simulations. One is going to be from Newton Wellesley Hospital. These are both framed on real cases. Of course, some of the information is changed to protect identities, but these are real cases, one that was resolved at Newton Wellesley Hospital. We heard some feedback from you last year that you'd like to see one in a different setting than an academic medical center, so we're presenting that for you today. This is a case where the standard of care was not met and caused significant harm to a patient. It's what we call a care insurer case, and the resolution of that was compensation. And then we have one from Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, which is an academic medical center. And the type of case is when the standard of care was met, even though there was significant harm. And the resolution is communication. We heard from you last year that you would like to see a simulation of a case where it's not so clear what to do, not so easy. And so we're going to show you that one as well. Then we'll have a data presentation of the last piece of our pilot study by Michelle Mello, who will video in. Then we'll have a keynote by the wonderful Rick Boothman, who's here today. And then we'll close with an address from our MACRMI chair, Ashley Yates. So, without further ado, we're going to get started with the simulation. So if I could have my actors get ready. Okay.
Hello.
Hi, Donna. I'm so glad I got you. It's Dr. Barclay. Look, I've got a patient up here, Mr. Josephson, in the ICU, and he's in real trouble. He's had a spinal fusion. Now he can't feel his legs at all. So we're about to take him back into the OR because I'm almost certain he has a bleed and he needs an evacuation now. So I've been zipping through his records trying to figure out what happened, but I have to tell you, I think something went wrong with the anticoagulation.
Oh, Craig, I'm so sorry to hear that. Is there any family here right now?
Well, not right now, but his daughter is coming in shortly.
Well, he must be really scared. I'll come up and meet with the family and find out what they need right now and how we can help. Did you discuss the anticoagulation issue with the patient at all yet?
Well, no, right now I have to make sure we get him back into the OR as soon as possible and stop any more damage from occurring, and hopefully we can save some of his mobility, but we will definitely need to look into this.
Okay. Why don't you give me a call after you get out of the OR? In the meantime, I'll pull the medical record to see if there are any risk management needs and how we can help with anything. What was the anticoagulation medication again?
So it was supposed to be a Lovenox bridge, but not until post-op day 2, and I know he got it before that.
Oh, poor guy.
Yeah, I just don't know why they would have given it to him. I specifically put a note in there about starting post-op day 2, and I see that the PA did the same. And the patient's already had a few poor outcomes from previous surgeries. In fact, I heard him tell his daughter on the phone that he doesn't think he'll survive this surgery.
Poor guy. Well, he's in good hands. We will figure out what happened, and we'll be very honest with him when we do, as that's what he would deserve. Good luck in the OR today.
Okay, thanks, Don. I'll keep you posted.
While we're switching scenes here, I just wanted to tell you, in your packet, you have a little guide to these simulations. So if you're confused on who the characters are or what's going on, there is a guide there, because I know sometimes
Good morning. Thank you for coming. I'm hoping you had a chance to review the medical record and the highlights I made within the record.
Yeah.
Great. I'm sure you probably noticed this is a very complex case, but our focus today is going to be about how the patient ended up on anticoagulation on the day of surgery after the operation, and not when it was supposed to be administered, which was on post-op day 2. We also want to make sure that this doesn't happen again, not only to anyone else, but for also to understand what we're going to tell the patient. Mr. Josephson.
Well, I reviewed the whole file, including your notes, Donna. I also talked with members of the pharmacy staff as well as the PA, and of course they were all very distraught about the whole situation. When we looked back at the records, it appears that one of the issues was that when ordering the Lovenox, the PA wrote the delayed administration instructions in the note for pharmacy section, thinking that was the clearest way to document it. The start date entered, however, was the date of the entry of the order instead of the date of the intended administration. We also noticed that when the order's pulled up on the pharmacy side of the Epic system, that the note is down on the bottom right-hand corner, and it's away from the actual order, so it's not immediately noticeable. And also, this box is used so infrequently that the pharmacy folks are not in the habit of looking at it.
We also found that the physicians didn't see it either. They don't normally look at that pharmacy, that special box. And then the nurses can't see it on their screen, so everybody sort of missed it.
Also, the neurovascular exams were at times poorly documented or sometimes missed entirely. I think we need some better training and standardization around this. And I'm not sure if the nurses or the PAs understood what the signs of a spinal hematoma would look like on these exams. And therefore, they weren't tipped off to call the attending until it was much too late. Also, if they did have concerns about his changing neurologic examination, that they may not have escalated or clearly communicated the concerns they had in a timely fashion.
Yeah, I think we'll have to definitely consider additional training, whether it's the examination, the documentation, and maybe we'll have to use even simulation for this. But I think we need to do a deeper dive into figuring out how to care for these fusion patients, what our staff know about what a bleed looks like, and then thinking about whether we need additional coverage. I mean, I think the PAs are not, and the surgeons are not always in sight, so should we consider maybe some hospitalist coverage or other co-management?
I'm not sure. I mean, it's worth exploring. Having a hospitalist co-management, because they're on site 24/7, they may have been able to catch the degradation earlier.
Okay, yeah, we'll have to talk about that. Let's talk about this note to the pharmacy box. It sounds like to me we should just eliminate this field altogether. It seems it's rarely used, nobody really knows what to use it for, and it's a big liability. So Donna, can you run a report in the field in Epic, just to get an idea if there's an area of the hospital that uses it and what it's used for, so we wouldn't eliminate it without checking all, uses for it?
Yes, I can definitely do that, and I will contact Epic to see if and when they can remove that field if it's not being used, which we pretty much think it isn't.
Okay, all right, great, we'll look for that answer on Epic. And I think the other thing we should consider is talking to the nurses and getting on the next nursing managers meeting agenda for the surgical floors and the ICU to discuss post-op bleeds and spinal fusion patients. Then we'll have a better idea of what they know, and then hopefully identify what additional training needs they might have.
Right.
Okay, no problem.
All right, now, in terms of talking to the patient, there has been a disclosure, correct?
Yes.
Yes, he knows he was given a Lovenox before he was supposed to, and that made him bleed, and that caused the return to the OR. I was present for the disclosure event. Dr. Barkley did a disclosure with the patient and his daughter. They were understandably upset, of course, but the patient was particularly worried about his wife at home, who he is the sole caregiver for. She is not able to walk and doesn't leave the home.
Yeah, this is really terrible. It's awful. I mean, this is certainly a preventable event, don't you think?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, so we need to make a call to CRACO and schedule a meeting with the patient at the rehab facility. This is definitely a care insurer case, and we need to do right by this patient. He's going to have long-term care needs, as is his spouse, and this is going to be quite complicated. We are going to have to also make sure he has an attorney to help sort through all this with him. And please make sure we hold any of the bills.
Do you want me to talk to the involved physicians about the care process?
No, I'll do that. I want them to know that we're all on board with the proactive nature of this, but also that they won't be hung out to dry. I think it's best if it comes from me.
Okay.
All right, Donna, can you get in touch with the family and let them know we'd like to have a follow-up meeting with them, and we can do it at the rehab facility, and let them know they're welcome to bring an attorney? Do you have that list of recommended attorneys from MACRMI that we can give them if they want?
Yes, we do. I do.
Okay, great. Thank you both.
Sounds good. Thank you.
This next scene takes place at the rehab facility. This is the discussion with the patient.
Knock, knock.
When?
Hi, Mr. Josephson?
Yes,
Hi, I'm Dr. Jody Larson. I'm the Chief Medical Officer at Newton Wellesley Hospital.
yes.
I had reached out to you and to try to speak to you. Is this still a good time?
Yes,
Okay, Sandra, is this your
Yes.
daughter?
I'm his daughter.
Yeah, nice to see you.
Yes,
too.
hi.
Yes. And you remember Donna?
All right, hi, Donna.
Nice to see you again.
Hi, Donna.
Hi, Sandra.
How are you feeling?
Well, I've definitely been better. But I'm glad to be out of the hospital. I'd rather be here than there. I thought I was gonna not get out of there alive.
Yeah, I'm truly sorry. This has been really unfortunate, and we really just wanted to meet with you today to talk about what happened and to answer any questions that you might have. Again, was that we talked about that Lovenox, and we're going to go through that a little bit with you. But we're really sorry that you received that early. It was given to you 2 days early, and it caused the area around your operation site to cause bleeding unintentionally, which caused now this paralysis you're experiencing. So we want to talk through a little bit more of that with you.
It's very troubling that he could even have been given this medication right after surgery. But it's even worse that no one recognized it for 2 days.
Yeah, I agree. So that's why I'm going to go through this with you. I'm happy to tell you exactly what happened, and you can feel free to continue to ask any questions as we go through this. We discovered that the medication was given for several reasons. The error happened. The main reason was that when the order for the medication was entered into the computer system, there was a note written to the pharmacy not to give it until 2 days after your operation. So it was put in to start now, but that there was a note to the pharmacy to say, actually, don't start it till 2 days later. And then this note was not seen by the pharmacist or other people, other providers.
Okay.
The problem was further compounded by the fact that the nurse could not see the note either on the medications, when administering the medications. And we know now that that's a big vulnerability in our system, that this notes field cannot be viewed by nursing or pharmacy. We're sorry we didn't recognize that before, and we want to work on getting this changed, prevent this from happening to someone else. We contacted the manufacturer of the software to ask them to eliminate this field altogether, so that not only will it not happen to other people, but so that the medication orders can only be written on the day that they are meant to be given.
All right.
As you mentioned, Sandra, we also feel that this should have been recognized earlier clinically. And so in regard to that, we are setting up some additional trainings for our nurses and our physician assistants so that we can be sure that they can recognize bleeds such as the one that happened here to you after spinal surgeries. We're also considering, as Jody mentioned earlier, adding some additional attending coverage in the hospital.
No, we know that this doesn't undo anything that happened to you. We're here to talk to you, though, and demonstrate. We're really serious about how we're taking this and how we're trying to prevent this from recurring.
That's all well and good, but that doesn't help us now.
No, I hear you. I know, but we wanted to talk to you about that part. Our hospital participates in something called the Communication, Apology, and Resolution, or a CARE process. What that means is when a mistake harms a patient, we want to be upfront and honest about that, which is why we're here today to talk through this with you. We also want to do right by you and know that this has harmed you both physically and financially and affects you in the care with your wife. And so we work through a process in which our insurer, which is a separate entity from us, reviews your care and works with you to compensate you fairly for what has happened. You can, and in fact you should, retain an attorney for this process. But it will be different from going to a court, and that we will try to resolve it quickly and fairly through conversations outside a courtroom.
Okay. Can I get any lawyer that I want?
Absolutely. You can certainly get any attorney you want. We do have a list of attorneys who represent patients in both the care process, who have experience with that, and as well as traditional medical malpractice cases that we can give you. Not every attorney is experienced in this type of honest and transparent resolution, so an organization that helps hospitals create care programs in Massachusetts called MACRMI has put a list of lawyers together. We can give that to you and welcome you to choose any attorney on the list that you might want.
Wow.
Or off the list.
Thank you for being honest with us. But if we do proceed, what do we do?
Well, you just have to sign this form to release the medical records to our insurer, CRICO. As Jody mentioned, they are not part of our hospital, so they need an authorization by you. It's permission for them to review your records. And once that is done, they'll begin the review process, and in the meantime, you can hire an attorney.
Okay. I appreciate your honesty, being upfront with us, but I have to say I'm really still very upset about what happened to me. And I'm worried about how I'm going to be able to function in the future. And most of all, I'm worried about how I'm going to take care of my wife.
I know. This should never have happened, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure this doesn't happen again. And we're really sorry that this happened to you. But we are going to do our best, everything within our power, to make this as best as it can be for you and for your wife, to support you in any way that we can moving forward.
Thank you for coming by.
And we know this is a lot of information we've given you today. It's almost like we've thrown a lot at you. So we want you to understand that we'll support you through the whole process.
And we're available to review this as many times as needed, to go through what happened, and to explain to other family members and answer your questions as you need.
Thank you.
Okay. Sorry again. Thanks.
Good morning. I'm Elaine Collins. I'm here with CRICO, and I will tell you that I was not part of that team. It was a different team with CRICO that handles Newton Wellesley, and the people that participated and did this job for CRICO are not available. So I'm pinch hitting, so bear with me. But I will tell you that this is what typically happens in these programs based on kind of the perfect setup. Specifically, this incident happened in September of 2017. The meeting happened immediately. Within a week of that, Newton Wellesley let us know of the claim. Let us know about the incident, and then the family, within about 10 days, let us know that they wanted to pursue a claim. Within 6 days of that, the claim rep reached out to the family to let them know that they were involved, to explain the entire process, how quickly they would like for it to occur. The claim rep emphasized the need for an attorney because of the complexity of the medicine, and to make sure that they were adequately educated through the process, and had someone sophisticated in this process to know what they were doing. The investigation at that point, we got the medical authorization. We started obtaining the medical records, getting experts on standard of care, causation, and damages. Within less than 3 months, the family retained legal counsel. This is legal counsel that we had worked with substantially over the years. So the claim rep had a very good relationship with this attorney, which made a big difference in this process. At that time, we also learned that they were a Medicare patient, which is important because oftentimes we have to cover, the carrier has to pay for the Medicare liens. It's by statute, and sometimes that delays the payment and the resolution. That's kind of beyond our control, but that's something very important, and I think we have to educate oftentimes attorneys and patients about this. But in that process, we have to get into Medicare's system and let them know that we are aware of that. Then within that, I guess within a week of that, the claim rep reached out to the attorney to let him know that she was involved. We did not get attorney involved. Our claim rep felt she had a good relationship with the plaintiff's attorney, so we could get this moving along quickly. At that point, when the claim rep spoke to the plaintiff's counsel, she asked him if he would submit a claim letter spelling out the allegations, spelling out the damages. The reason this is important is because it'll move along our experts to understand what their theories are. Even though this may be obvious, we still need to understand. We need to understand who they're pointing fingers at, which is important for our reporting purposes. And within about 3 months of that, less than 3 months, the plaintiff counsel sent that notice to us, and within 2 months of that, the claim rep said, I'm finished. We've finished our investigation. We're ready to start negotiating. There was a mediation set up within 3 months of that. And the reason that was delayed is that sometimes it's hard to get mediators involved. We didn't want to delay it. We wanted to move this along as quickly as possible. So we got a mediation in August. I'll tell you that that mediation happened all day long. We did not reach a resolution, but the mediator, the claimant, and the attorney continued to communicate. And with a month of that mediation, the case was settled. So this is a very quick process. I will tell you, this is not always typical, but when we've got a good relationship with plaintiff's counsel and a good relationship with the claim rep or the carrier, and we often work with the same people all the time, which is important. And the family chose this attorney. We did not choose it for them. And it was not a care attorney, but oftentimes they do. And those, I understand, the hospitals, I know BI, Newton Wellesley always provide that list. But again, it's the patient's choice on who to proceed with. And these care attorneys are amazing, but I will tell you, generally, most of the attorneys we work for are amazing and want to resolve this. And so at that point, within 2 months of that agreement that we had reached a resolution, we paid off the Medicare lien, and within a month of that, we paid off the final settlement, and so the case was resolved. This is an amazing result. Again, it happens often, but not all the time, because complexities, attorneys, people are angry, whatever, but this was kind of the perfect setup, and it worked very, very well. And we have to thank Newton Wellesley for that. We have to thank all the parties that were involved, the staff. They really made it very easy in that sense, and I think this is an amazing process that CRICO is very, very supportive of, and we try to work closely with our hospitals to make these things successful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's have a round of applause for our actors.
Okay.
And if I can have the Newton Wellesley team come back up to the stage, we're going to have a little discussion. Okay, so now we're just going to have a moderated discussion about the scene that you have seen. Rick will moderate that. We have a few questions to start with, but then we'll open it up to the audience. If you do have a question, please, if you can, come down to one of these mics, and if you can't, just raise your hand and I'll come and bring a mic to you.
Thank you, Melinda, and thanks for everybody. I'm Rick Boothman, and I've been asked to ask a few questions. Dawn, I want to start with you because I was interested in that the setting of the very first conversation. You have an exciting job, right? You're coming into work, you have lots of things on your mind, and you get that phone call. Right. And it always comes at an odd time. What was interesting to me is your response to Dr. Barclay, who said, this is what happened, this guy got Lovenox too soon. And one of your responses in that first conversation was simple but direct. We will figure out what happened. Why didn't you just take what Dr. Barclay told you as fact?
Well, most because the first part of the story I find is usually not all the story. And I find usually that one side, there's a whole nother companion side to the story. So that means to me there's always a lot more facts that we need to figure out, a lot more people to involve, such as the pharmacist, the staff on the floor, the nurse director, and all of those folks.
So the reality for us is, in the heat of the moment, things that seem clear are almost never clear. And it almost never turns out the way it comes through the door. And you were conditioned to say, you said all the right things, basically. You said, take care of the patient, we'll get to the bottom of this. And that's kind of, you're doing that multiple times a week, aren't you?
Right.
Yeah. The other thing, to our CMO, Jody, I keep wanting to say Trudy. If I say that, I don't mean it.
At least it rhymes. Right.
I recognize that this is a simulation, but I want to ask you a kind of a basic question. When we become aware of an acute event like this, there are 3 things in this model that need to happen nearly simultaneously. You want to take care of the patient, run to the patient, not away. You You want to take care of your caregivers. In this situation, that's a little more amorphous because it turned out to be more of a system issue than really the fault of one caregiver. But thirdly, you want to nail down the safety of the clinical setting because this could happen in the next hour to somebody else. So in this case, and I recognize this is a simulation, we didn't get into all those little facts, but can you talk a little bit about what your instinct is as the CMO? What ought to be, what's running through your mind in that early moment when you first hear about this case on how to make sure that this doesn't happen while you're sorting the pieces out?
Yeah. I mean, the first reaction is like, holy crap. This is bad. But I think this happened, it was actually Labor Day weekend, and so I got a call before, just like this, I got a call before the patient went to the OR to evacuate the hematoma. So we heard that they were going to the OR, and then we wanted to hear, we're waiting to hear what happened in the OR. But immediately, I don't think we even knew about the Lovenox right away, actually. So we knew that there was maybe we missed some signs in the, along the way with maybe communication with nursing, shift to shift, and doctors. We heard there was maybe a little bit of something, got a whiff of something before that. So, as I said, it was Saturday, Labor Day weekend. I think a bunch of us went in. The chief nurse and I went in the next day and sort of talked to the staff to figure out what had happened. And then, met with the physician. And I think, we didn't really recognize, as I said, that Lovenox issue. And that was such an unusual issue because it's not the way we typically write orders. So we knew that probably wasn't going to be an immediate concern with that. But I think you're absolutely right. Making sure that the staff are okay, can provide adequate care, making sure that the family is supported in any way, that if they have a lot of questions that still need to be answered or anything going on, that we need to go in immediately. I think we talked to the family 2 days later after we had done enough of an investigation. And then identifying, you're right, if it was truly a glitch with Epic or something, if we had identified it right then, we would have, called the head of partners to say we have a glitch in Epic and then we need to sort of, alert people. We've done that on Saturday mornings before to say there was something maybe at North Shore that we then we go all out across the system to fix and communicate about the issue.
So you see the huge difference between this and deny and defend. Deny and defend, everybody hunkers down, you put your head down and you wait for a claim. In this, your first instinct is a sense of urgency. Oh my gosh, this could happen to somebody else. So with that in mind, can we talk a little bit about when is a good time to talk to the patient about corrective actions? Is that always the same time? Is the timing different? And what does it depend on?
I think it's different in every situation. I think we immediately went to the bedside with this patient in the ICU. I said, 2 days later after he was sort of a little bit more together. And he didn't have any idea what we were talking about. And so you're like, okay, realizing that he just, he needed his family there, his daughter. So I called the daughter and talked to her on the phone and asked her to come in. And so it really depends on, what you can disclose at the time, meaning, the investigation sometimes takes a while. So when you want to have all the facts, as many as you can before you communicate, or you say you don't have it all, but you're going to keep coming back when you get more information. But I think it truly depends when the family's ready to hear it. And how much you're ready to disclose. But there's no standard. I think having that initial conversation early, no matter how limited it is probably helpful because then you get a gauge of how quickly you need to move through the process.
I think when they hear the intention, they hear clearly from us that we intend to find out what happened. They're not ready to hear all the details like Jody just said, but we have a clear intention. We communicate that to them. We have a clear intention to find out what happened and to tell you that.
Well, and there could be an unintended a negative implication because when you sit down and tell someone who's just been harmed, oh, by the way, there are 20 things we're doing so that this never happens again, many people will understandably say, why didn't you do that before this happened to me? And the reality is we are all changed by the knowledge that something fell through the cracks, somebody got hurt. But Elaine, would you talk, the insurance carrier is a really important partner to all of this. And you serve such a valuable role because you're a translator in many ways. You take people who are not accustomed to thinking in terms of dollar value, translation of dollar value to human suffering. I mean, that's really your specialty. But you're also serving as kind of a guard against the hospital either self-flagellating or falling into overly defensiveness. So the carrier's role in part initially is to do what? Double check the conclusions?
Really, it's a matter of, because we're talking about medical malpractice, I think the hospital is looking at it from a different perspective, what they're learning to improve. We're looking at it purely from med-mal, so we look at standard of care. We owe it to our doctors to look at standard of care, causation, and damages. And that's important, and we use experts, unbiased, clinicians. We have them review, we have them look at the medical records, and then once we conclude that, as you can see, it takes some time, then we decide it's time to start mediating. And we base those values really on similar type cases, scenarios that have occurred, verdicts, that kind of information. So there's a objective kind of valuation of this.
Because litigation's always a backstop, ever-present
Absolutely.
backstop. If things fall apart, you still have to deal with that possibility.
Absolutely. And in this scenario, it was at the claim level. There was no suit filed. And obviously, we would like to get it done at that point if we can.
So the reason I came to you at this stage was, in terms of disclosure of corrective actions, does the insurer get involved in that timing question? When in the relationship between hospital and patient, should they be talking about what could have been done differently or what they learned from this?
Does the carrier get involved in that
Yes.
conversation? No, that's something totally different. We purely deal with the care at this time and talking to them about what our process is, what our investigation is, how long it will take, and so we're dealing specifically with the incident. The hospital's disclosure is purely to assure the family we want to learn from this process and we want to improve, and we want to make sure, try our best to prevent this from happening again. So that's a hospital issue. We're purely involved with dealing with evaluating the standard of care, causation, and damages.
Do you ever worry that a premature mea culpa and disclosure of all of this by the hospital will somehow tie your hands before you even get a chance to be involved?
Well, there's an interesting balance that occurs with that. I mean, I think the mea culpa is, I think there's a standard of what our hospital standard is. We don't ever want our patients to get harmed. And when we evaluate this, we believe that there's something that took place that was not, that shouldn't have, as opposed to standard of care, which is a different standard. And so a different standard is what the average treating specialty is. So when there's that discussion with the hospital, they're apologizing for this outcome. We didn't want this to happen. We're so sorry this happened to you, and we're going to prevent it from happening again. With the carrier, we explain, and when I said that our claim rep met with them literally within 6 days, reached out and said, this is our process. We're getting your medical records. We're getting experts to look at the standard of care in the community. This is a community hospital. And look at causation and damages. So we kind of explained the difference of the evaluation.
Okay. Can I ask Mr. Josephson a question? Yeah, sure. Good. Do you think that the clarity of the mistake influences the way you receive that disclosure? In other words, is it worse for you as the patient to find out that this was just, there was no gray area in this case, it just shouldn't have happened? Does it make you more angry? I mean, what is the mix of emotions at that point in time?
I think knowing something happens that really shouldn't have happened is going to be upsetting no matter how you slice it. But the admission of something that happened, as opposed to any hint of either covering it up or trying to sugarcoat it or disguise it as something that it wasn't, the honesty there, I think, is also appreciated. So, and I think also, for me personally, if I were to hear something that happened that I could, even if it's a little convoluted, understand it as a human error as opposed to something that was either completely negligent or malicious or in any other way. I think the fact that, okay, this was truly an accident, a mistake, they're being honest about it, they're sorry about it, I'm still going to have the anger, but I think I'm going to be a little more understanding of what happened and how, as opposed to it being a mystery or something that I feel like they're deliberately hiding from me.
While I have you on the spot, can you talk about the value of doing this in person as opposed to over the phone?
Oh, I think it's, I mean, I don't know, I guess everybody's different, but I think part of an apology and part of what's the word, contrition is owning up to it in person and giving a face to what happened. I feel like, there's always going to be a different level of familiarity with whoever might have done this. Maybe I never met the person before. Maybe I did meet this person before. Maybe it was somebody who was at my bedside that I had a previous trusting relationship with. I think that kind of thing face-to-face does a lot more than by the phone, or even worse, in a letter that feels impersonal and maybe I'm covering my bases, I'm covering my butt, as opposed to I'm truly sorry, you deserved my full attention and you deserved to hear this from my lips in front of me, and however angry you're going to be about it, I totally understand.
So in these emotional situations, people only hear a fraction of, or they only absorb a fraction of what they may hear in those conversations. Would you have, as the patient, appreciated all of this in writing after the fact?
I think so. I think because that just sort of backs up what we've talked about, that again, there's no design to confuse me, especially in a vulnerable state. I heard what was said here, but clearly in that conversation, I don't think I could have absorbed everything that was said. I appreciate, as the character says in this, I appreciate for being honest and upfront with me, but to follow up, I think, as was offered, gives me more confidence in the fact that I'm getting the full story by saying, we're going to, in case you didn't fully understand this, in case you have more questions, we're going to kind of write up what we said here. And if you have any questions, once you are actually able to look it over and fully absorb it, we're here to answer those. I feel like that's another level of disclosure that is going to make the patient feel less like they're being handled.
So I think that's an excellent way to put it. And I really liked the way this was done. And I think it was Dawn who said, we've thrown a lot at you. Let me give you a start to start. Why don't you start putting your expenses together or whatever? We'll have another conversation. It's rarely, in fact, we would never at Michigan try to do compensation and error disclosure in the same conversation. Those are emotionally different places, substantively different places. But Dawn, how have you, I know your name's not Dawn, but you're Dawn to me. What did you anticipate? You have a separation in the damage evaluation because now CRICO is going to come in. So there's sort of an already built-in bifurcation of those two, aren't there?
Oh, yes, yes. I wouldn't be involved with the decision on the financial compensation. I might be able to say to the patient, that will be discussed, but I would not be involved in the actual dollar discussions.
Would you provide feedback to Elaine? This is what I've observed, this is what I've seen. The wife has told me X, the daughter's told me Y.
Absolutely. I would always communicate to the claims rep anything that's of importance that I think that they would need to know to make decisions about financial resolution.
Now, the one thing that I observed here that I wasn't clear on is many hospitals have a completely separate process for doing root cause analyses and event reviews. And often there are silos separating the risk and the folks dealing with the patient from those fixing. In our demonstration, our CMO actually started that process to talk about what are we going to do to fix this, who should we have at the table. Would normally there be a more formal process where others, say the chief information officer might be involved, or the connection with Epic so that they can fix this problem? I mean, how would that go in a more elaborate explanation of this?
So we would schedule a collaborative case review, and we would have all those people at the meeting. Chief information officer, chief medical officer, the staff involved, pharmacy, nursing, risk management. We would not have the claims rep at that meeting, but we would have the quality folks involved at that meeting as well.
And why would you not have the claims person there?
I think that it's, we have not done that yet, but I don't see why we couldn't.
Well, we do it separately. I think part of the thing is we'd like the hospital to be the good guy, and if we have to be the bad guy, we'll be the bad guy. Not that we want to be, if you know what I mean. But I think your goal is to learn compassion, and we are as well. But we have to have sometimes difficult conversations that we don't want them to have to worry about. Plus, this is a privileged, I think,
Right, it's a peer
meeting,
review
and
protected.
we are not
meeting.
allowed under peer review, so I don't think you can have the claim rep there as
Okay.
well.
I think there's a more fundamental thing that you may have been edging toward, and that is when we receive news of an adverse event, when a patient is harmed in an unintended way, we are all changed by that. We never want those people whose job it is to ensure that we're the safest that we can be to worry about the financial impact from the litigation perspective. We never want that to be a chilling impact. It's excellent that this is bifurcated and separated, apart from the legal rules and those sorts of things, from a really fundamental thing, because what we're really trying to do is build a sense of accountability and a relentless priority on patient safety.
Right.
We do this not because it's, quote, the right thing to do. We do it because we will never improve if we cheat people or we dodge a bullet here and there and hurt somebody but not have to pay for that. It does raise a question to me, though. You alluded, Elaine, to the, I call it horse trading that goes on in med-mal circles. Lay people often find it macabre to find out that there's sort of a market value for certain kinds of injuries. Birth trauma cases are going for X, and spine injuries are going for Y. It is a sick environment, I think. When you talked about valuing this patient's case and getting involved in the discussion, two things happened that might be seen as different or inconsistent. One was the request to the patient or the patient's lawyer to start gathering out-of-pockets, get started. I just want to know what the expenses are. That's a very tailored thing. But then you talked a little bit about kind of the mediation process and going back and forth on the horse trading, if you will. How do you build accountability if an injury has sort of a generic value as opposed to looking at the patient and paying for the harm that you created? Or do you do both?
You do both in the sense that everything's custom, just like your handling of this situation is custom. Our negotiation is very custom. I mean, that's why I think the claim rep asked the plaintiff's attorney, send me a letter to talk about what your client went through, what they're suffering, what are their damages now, what do they anticipate. So there is a customization of this process. We might have kind of an idea of valuing, but we take into account in very detailed, that's why we have experts look at damages, because our experts actually look at the care the patient will need in the future. So there is a customization. It's not so black and white or insensitive. There is a true caring and understanding of what this patient's going through, and that goes into the equation of valuing the settlement.
I'm glad you said that, because the first conversation is really more listening than anything.
Absolutely.
And it is such a show of respect to say to a patient, your injury really matters to me, not as a category of an injury. Oh, it's a retained foreign object, we can get those usually for $40,000. No. That's very, very insulting to a patient, right, because they're not here selling a good, they're here to explain what happened to them. Absolutely. So it's a nice, and yet you can never lose sight of, because you are a steward of the financial resources here. You can't lose sight of what is right and what is wrong, right, or what is sort of a market value. I had a lady, we left some packing in a woman after repairing a vaginal or a uterine laceration. We left it in for 2 weeks. It was horribly embarrassing, and when they pulled the 6 feet of packing out, it was terrible, and she wanted $1 million. And all I could say to her was, you know, you might be right, but I just have to tell you that's sort of not even in the ballpark from my perspective. It's not easy. So yeah. What is the value of a lawyer in this setting?
The value of a lawyer, especially this lawyer, I think with any lawyer, especially if you have a good relationship, I'll tell you there's a lot of them on both sides that it's hard to communicate. But with this particular one, this claim rep had worked with him a lot. He was very professional. He really cared about his clients, which is you would expect to be normal, but it's not, unfortunately. But really cared about it. And so in dealing with this lawyer, he understood the details of this patient, the trauma and the difficulty, but he also understood he had tried cases, he knew what cases were valued and their value as well. So he really brought the patient down to a realistic awareness of what this would be worth or not. He made a demand, but when we negotiated, and I think in the mediation, I think the family was at the mediation, we got close, but we really couldn't get too close. And it took a little bit more time, but I think with the lawyer there's a realization of what this is valued, and how to make that patient whole.
I'm going to ask one. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
I'm going to ask one more question, but if any of the audience have any questions, get to the microphone. But the question I want to ask here is of our panel, what is the difference, do you think, between this case playing out in an academic health system versus a smaller community hospital?
I think to some of the points you raised is that we don't work in silos. We're a small enough place that a lot of people have multiple roles. So when we get in a room together, we've got our risk managers, we've got our quality folks, we can get all the people in the room, so we're able to do it in coordinated effort across the organization. I think we have limited resources, which is some of the struggles versus an AMC, but one of the things about participating in this program, there's a ton of resources. We can call our friends at the BI, there's a lot of,
You're part of a big community.
Part of a big community, so I don't think we're alone, and we have struggles, and I called Ellen Kachela many times about how I deal with some of these cases, and so I think there's some benefits to being in a small, that we are small and we can work closely together, and I think in being part of a system, it's been beneficial for us too, so.
Great. Question?
My name's Joe Heyman. I'm an obstetrician gynecologist. I practiced for 41 years. And during the introduction and during this part, I heard about systems, hospitals, institutions. I heard physicians won't be hung out to dry at one point. But what I'm wondering about is even Newton Wellesley is a pretty big community hospital compared to the hospital I worked in. And I'm wondering if the physician involved, and actually the whole reason I'm here today is you don't have to persuade me about apologies, but you do have to persuade me about a small independent practicing physician. And what I want to learn by the end of today is that physician really is not hung out to dry. And my concern is if that physician has a different carrier for insurance, what happens when the physician leaves the packing in for 2 weeks and the institution goes and takes care of all that, and what's going to happen to the independent practicing physician? So, and even more specific than that, I would love it if somebody would give me 2 cases that happened in Massachusetts in the last 5 years where an independent practicing physician actually gave an apology and an insurance company made the offer for that physician. So if somebody could give me that before I leave today, that would make me very happy.
I can address this. I mean, I can tell you that CRICO covers all the Harvard hospitals, so we insure both the physicians and the staff.
Yeah, but I'm asking about when there's a different carrier for the physician.
Well, then we can't address that because well, I will tell you there are times in some of our community hospitals where there's a separate, a physician may be covered by someone else, and I think it all depends on whether that carrier is participating. I know oftentimes Coveris covers the doctors and we may cover the staff. And I know we work together. In the situation of CRICO, though, the reason the claim rep asked the plaintiff's attorney to come in and say, give me your letter, because it describes the exposure and what their experts' suggestion or opinion was as to who committed negligence or med mal. And then we compared that to our experts. And none of the defendant, in fact, I don't even think the surgeon had a role in this, to be honest with you. I don't think they were, this was put on them. The question is, for us, is when we allocate it to a particular healthcare provider, nobody's ever hung out to dry. It's just a matter of we have a duty under the National Practitioners Data Bank and Mass Medical Society to report, or the board to report these. And I've been doing this at CRICO for over 10 years, and I've never seen where a case has been settled on behalf of a physician or a staff member that it's negatively impacted them in one scenario. The bottom line is that we have to allocate it. In Mass, we're a little different from Michigan, where they put it in the hospital's name. That's not how it works for us.
Well, let me answer the question, though, because I have actually a lot of experience with that. The answer is this. First of all, there's some prep time. Can I get around? Thanks.
Joe.
First of all, there's some prep time for the individual doc who is privately insured. You should have that conversation before anything bad happens. You should know how your insurance carrier is going to respond, and you should have that conversation ahead of time. Secondly, you should have a private attorney, just like you have an accountant and everybody else as part of your team, somebody with an understanding of this issue and someone you can go to in the heat of the moment when when it happens to you. When it does happen to you, and there's a division of carriers like that, what we did at Michigan, and there's this common misconception that I had only University of Michigan cases. That wasn't true at all. We would always say to the other carrier and the other doctor, we are going to do this, but we will do our best to stay off your toes. We really want to do it in a unified stance. So let's have a meeting first, and we would issue that invitation. In the original time, in 2001, when I started, most carriers thought that I was crazy. In fact, one of the competing insurance carriers called the regents for the university and said I was sleeping with the enemy, and it went on and on. Today, it's not a foreign concept. And you should be able to have that conversation with your carrier. And then if CRICO needs to reach out to Coveris and say, I think we're both in this mix together, let's settle on the facts. I would hope that the insurers would work together. And sometimes the insured needs to put pressure on their insurer, because insurers have kind of arbitrary and, in my opinion, stupid barriers, like we're not even going to talk to anybody until there's a claim issued. That is so counterproductive to your interests that it seems silly to me, but that's fairly common. So the answer to the question is yes, this can be done. It can be done very successfully. There are times, in terms of the fallout, there are times when a single error can suggest to the hospital that there's a credentialing issue or a peer review possibility, that this was such a dumb error, or maybe worse, that this independent physician, and we have an obligation as a credentialing body to look into that independent physician. That is exceedingly rare, but it's possible, and I've seen that. So what happens after that becomes a negotiation between the carriers and eventually the patient. But I would never, if I were counseling a care organization, I would never say to them, throw your hands up and forget it when you have an outside carrier. There's today good opportunities to start that, but I would always start that. I would never have the conversation without inviting a unified front that way, so that we all knew what we were doing, because trust is so important.
And
Can I answer your question? No.
one other, if I could
let me
just add.
try.
I'm not interested in the theoretical. I'm interested in Massachusetts and exactly what happens here.
I can tell you from CRICO's point, and I'm sorry, Alan, we always let the doctor know. There's the first person we meet with.
I understand that, but that's Franco.
Let me just,
Okay.
I think there actually are some, we could get you some of those things, but Alan.
That's what I'm asking.
Okay.
I don't need to know who it is, I just need to know the insurance company and what actually happened.
so we're confident Reliant has done this, but in addition, Coveris is here and represented today, and they've done this. And one of the things we worked on, Joe, was to develop a best practice for insurers, such that when there are multiple insurers, because there may be multiple defendants involved, that they're all working towards the same end. So one of the issues is, as Rick pointed out, is to make sure that your insurer in advance is going to go through this process in a constructive fashion with you.
I think all of this planning is wonderful, but what I'm asking is a simple question. Are there two cases in Massachusetts where a small independent practice.
I'm a chief
medical
medical officer at a small community hospital, and I can tell you, as the chief medical officer who wears multiple hats, I happen to also be the chair of MACRMI, and really appreciate all of you being here. I have been personally involved with private practice physicians who are insured by one carrier, with the hospital insured by the other. Worked with them both to bring cases to resolution where there was a payment. The vast
And that was a small.
and that was a 88-bed Massachusetts hospital.
No, he's asking,
sorry.
was it an individual physician or a physician from a small group practice?
It was I believe that it was a small group practice. The physician had a single partner.
But in addition, I think Coveris is committed to working, if you don't have an infrastructure and it's just an individual physician, to working to help resolve the case through this process also. So I think we can find you multiple cases, Joe. That's not an issue. But I think what is critical is that you're insurer, that you understand what your insurer's policy is relative to this, and that you have an insurer who's going to represent you going through this process. As well as Rick mentioned, it's useful to have your own attorney to make sure that they help you through the process if you don't have the infrastructure of an institution.
Let's take one more question.
I'm Bob Stiller from Yale New Haven Health. My question is, in this scenario, the patient had some very immediate needs, taking care of his wife. How does one address that before you've really come to an agreement of the lawyers and the settlement? Was that addressed, or is that a best practice to recognize the immediate needs that this family has to try to help them while this whole process is being carried out?
Like I said, I wasn't involved. I think a lot of us don't. I can't answer that directly, but I have had a scenario where a hospital had a wife that needed to come in and visit her husband and stay in a hotel because they lived farther away. And so the hospital actually paid for the wife's hotel expenses and food. And then when we decided there was liability and we paid it, we reimbursed the hospital. So the hospital, and I know our hospitals do that. We've done it in other scenarios where they'll go in and say, by the way, Crico, we're going to pay this. We want to help the family. And I said, great, we'll reimburse you if we decide that there's liability. And, we've done it many times.
I think we
But
did.
they want to be very attentive to those needs.
Yes. No, we did reach out, and I think the family, the daughter, and others were very supportive and moved in with the mom and helped as we went through this process. So I think but I think that was an option as well.
Right,
We paid for
right.
some caregivers to get in the home. I think the family rallied and helped.
Is that basically the best practice, is to recognize your needs and try to help resolve them while you're still sorting out before they have an attorney or anything like that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There is I will modify that just a little bit. There are times when your instincts tell you, boy, this sure doesn't look like malpractice, and you don't want to behave as though it does. So there is a gut check early on where it's the clearer that it is, the more likely you're going to say to yourself, of course, we're going to ameliorate those damages. I've purchased vans, we've paid mortgages, all before there was any paper at all involved. So, but it is a judgment. It's not an automatic, let's just arrange for lifetime home care nursing and then we'll sort it out in a doubtful case.
Yeah, unfortunately, this was a very clear-cut case, so, I think we say that, what can we do to help you right now?
As was the one I cited as well. It was very clear-cut.
Yes. My name is Judd Klein. I'm a physician, and I've been a patient all too often this past decade or so. My question, I think, is a less emotional one. I think we recognize that system problems are very often the cause, or very much the cause of these kinds of issues. And we all know about silos. And I'm wondering, I heard in the presentation that the problem with Epic and the electronic health record was identified early on, and the Newton Wellesley, as part of partners, notified the entire system. But I'm wondering about the responsibility of Epic itself. Especially, I know that UMass uses Epic, and all Epic is not created equal.
Right.
But is it a one-way street? I know that Newton Wellesley or the partners reported this to Epic for a modification of their record. But what is Epic's responsibility to collect this kind of information and disseminate it among their customers and other institutions to prevent these things from happening elsewhere?
And I can't answer that, can
I mean, I think that's a great question. We do talk about it, like some of the CMO or CQO councils at partners to talk about how it gets communicated to Epic, and Epic, will respond or not respond. So it's kind of inconsistent in what we get back from Epic, but there is that talk about making sure that Epic is aware of some of the issues that we have come across so that they can rebuild stuff or communicate. But I'm not entirely certain what the process is. I hear, bits and pieces, but.
I think we wish we had a lot of influence over Epic. That would be great.
Yeah, right.
Thank you so much. We are going to go for a break until 11 o'clock, and then we'll have our second scenario. There are snacks and things out there. Thank you.